Just to remind ourselves that last week, the President announced that we are going to move from level 5 to level 4, and that we are not lifting the lockdown per se, but we are adopting a risk-adjusted approach where we will progressively allow the economy to function whilst at the same time taking precautions to make sure that the spread of the virus is contained. And then on Saturday, we spoke to you about what that might entail. And that was a whole document on which the regulations would be based. But we decided that, government decided that we must at least consult the public. So we put that document in public and asked for comments. And we did receive the comments. Some of the issues were taken on board. Others were not easy to take on board in relation to the spread of the virus. So I will mention some of those that we were able to take on board. But let me just say thank the public, because there was a good response, even though the time was short. There were over 70,000 submissions, though some of them came after the deadline. And also there were about 800 and something from the business sector. So it was a good response, and we thank everyone who responded. Others, of course, sent us SMSs and calls and didn't necessarily send submissions. So I will now go to the things that, before I go to the regulations, one of the most popular submission was on exercise. Over 22,000 people wanted exercise. But I'll come back to what the regulations say about exercise. Let me just say that, again, as we said last time, we still expect everyone to be at home. Every person must be at home. And we will then mention the exceptions. And that you may only leave home if you are going to work or perform any function that is allowed under level 4. So you are allowed to go to work on all things that are on level 4. You are also allowed, as was in level 5, to go out to do your shopping. We will also say what kind of things you can now buy. Before, it was mainly groceries, mainly pharmaceutical products, toiletries, and those kind of things, baby clothes. But as I talk about regulations, I will also say what more things we can now buy. And of course, we also are saying that children can move. We were informed by the public that lots of children some of them had visited grandparents, some of them had visited uncles, aunts, and so on. And they are allowed now to move back to their homes. And the co-parenting movement is also allowed. There is also, you can also leave to go and exercise. We did stress last time that the president said exercise will be allowed under very strict conditions. And we said we will announce those strict conditions when we announce the regulations. So under these regulations, you can cycle, you can run, you can walk, but it will have to be within your neighborhood, within about 5-kilometer radius of your neighborhood, your home. And it will also be not under organized groups, can run as a club or as a group. But you also can only do that between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. So 3 hours, we can all cycle, run, walk within our residence, not in organized groups, because we still need to keep to the health, social distancing, and we also need to limit then the time. So that is about the exercise that so many people were longing for. We are also saying that in the evenings, though more people will be going to work under level 4 than under level 5, because under level 5 it was really essential services basically. But now there'll be more people going to work. But when you come back from work, you have to be at home. It's not a license for now coming back from work, visiting your relatives, visiting your friends. No, you have to come back and go back home. So between 8 p.m. and 5 a.m., if you are not having a permit to be out, you cannot be out. So you have to be at home between 8 p.m. and 5 a.m. And of course, there are people who work in Gauteng, but they live in Northwest, or they live in Mpumalanga, or they live in Limpopo, in the neighborhood, and they commute every day. If they are supposed to go to work, they will then have a permit to show that they are allowed. And when the schools do open, whenever, if there are kids or university students who have to commute in that way, they also will have to have a permit. We also know that there is no movement between provinces. Now, this is very important because provinces are at different levels of the infection. Some have a much higher rate of infection. So we don't want those who are at a higher rate of infection to keep moving to those who are at a moderate rate of infection and then increase the infection in those provinces. So movement between provinces is still not allowed. Of course, funerals are still allowed. You can, under very strict conditions again, go to the funerals. If you are a close relative and it's not changed from what it was, what it is as we speak today. Only those close relatives are allowed, and under the same conditions. They have to have a death certificate, they have to have a permission that they will get from police station or a magistrate. So it's still like that. It's also still the same that you can't have night vigils. But it's also important during the week not to have crowds because the infection will also take place during the week if a lot of people come to the home of the bereaved at the same time. So we know that in our culture, fanesio tutuza and console the family, but we must not go in big crowds. And the funerals, we must take all the precautions, including sanitizing, gloves for those who are digging the graves and not sharing water and all those things. So funerals, it will be like that. Now, there were people, as we all know, N2, N1, N3, all the national roads were full. As soon as the president announced that there will be a 21-day lockdown, people decided to move from some of the major centers like Joburg, Durban, and so on. They went to their homes. Some of them would need to come back for work if their companies are opening. Some of them went there, but they ordinarily reside in another province. So there will be a once-off allowance for people to move from the provinces they are in to the provinces that they are going to be working in, and to move if they were not at home, if they were visiting somewhere and they were locked down there, to come back home, once off. And once they've arrived, they cannot go home weekends, days, some days decide I'm going to Limpopo, I'm going to KZN. No, once you come back until the end of level 4. So it's a once-off movement. And I think all of us must understand it. It's a once-off movement from one province to the other. And once you are in that province, there's no commuting going up and down. Weekends going this way, after the weekend coming this way, no. So I just thought I should stress that. And of course, my colleagues will talk a lot more on the industries. But even the industries that are going to be opened, retailers, manufacturing, whatever, hardware shops, it's important for them to prepare properly because their health protocols still need to be observed. Sanitation, PPE, where it's needed, masks are mandatory, and of course, social distancing. There is no industry that is supposed to undermine those things. So it's important for them to come prepare so that when more employers come, the company is ready, is COVID-19 ready. And it's important because if you are not COVID-19 ready and people come, you don't screen them, they come and start working, you don't adhere to the protocols, sooner or later there will be a spread of the virus in that company. And that company will be forced to close. So it's good to prepare properly, to spend a bit of money making sure that you are COVID-19 ready so that you can work for much longer without many problems. So that is very important. It doesn't matter what company it is, those preparations are important. And it's also important that workers should come in a phased manner, especially in those industries where there are thousands of people who are coming back to work, You can't just suddenly have thousands of people arriving at work on the first day. So it's important to do that in a phased manner and to have a proper plan that is known by the workers and by everyone that you can keep in the company, that this is our COVID-ready plan. And this is what we do in the company to make sure that there is no spread, not just the preparations for arrival, but also when work is continuing, what are the measures that each company is going to take. And the employers must know, so that if those measures are not adhered to, they can raise an alarm. But also the departments that work with certain sectors may want to monitor and make sure that those companies do actually adhere to that. In terms of, now I was talking about movement of people within the country. Now our borders, the sea borders, ports, the airports, the land ports of entry are still closed. So our borders are not open, except for goods that are arriving into the country or leaving the country, especially to our neighboring states. The movement of people across the borders is only allowed under very exceptional circumstances, like South Africans returning home who were stuck somewhere. When they return, they must be quarantined for 14 days before they go to their families or their homes or to work or anywhere. That's very important because we know that some of them will be coming from very high-risk countries where the infection is much higher than it is here. And so it's important for them to be quarantined so that we know when they come out to go to their families or to the communities, they do not have COVID-19. And people citizens of other countries who are stuck here during the lockdown, who want to be repatriated, there is a process that is coordinated mainly by DECO and embassies to repatriate them so they can leave the country. But otherwise, the ports are only opened for goods that are coming in, imports or exports that are going out of the country. And tourism will also assist those tourists who were quarantined far away from the ports to make sure that they come to the ports on time for their flights. So those are the movements of people